Hello, everybody. Once again, we are the Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings with your hosts Lehman, Mark, and JM, where the storm has a name. Today, I might get into a bit of coughing fit, so if you're watching, I have headphones and a microphone that I can quickly shut off. I personally apologize for not having an episode last week because I was sick and I couldn't even get through this much without having a coughing fit. Mark and JM were ready. I'm the one that canceled, so lay the blame at my feet.
Nah, dude, life happens.
So, so we are going to do part 2 of the Nile Empire. But before then, we have a couple emails that we want to get to. And then at the end, we'll have a last email, and we'll put it at the end. You'll find out why when we get there. So the first email I'd like to read is from Luke, and it says, "Hi all, I'm really enjoying your respective takes on the cosms, and they are giving me the chance to review my own thoughts about them too. Looking forward to the Pan Pacifica and Cyber Papacy podcast when they arrive. Have you had any players balk at playing in a particular cosm, e.g. Rorsch, Tharkold, or the Cyber Papacy? I think Rorsch would be fascinating to play in, especially with the Soul Survivor medal. What happens, second question, what happens if Ords travel repeatedly across a pure dominant zone into core Earth? I'm curious about how air travel in Australia would occur now that Pan Pacifica and cover your ears for spoilers for about 20 seconds now that Pan Pacifica has dropped a Maelstrom bridge into New South Wales. Wait a few moments, and then probably it's been that long. So now if you're back, have any of your players or yourselves provided any memorable moments of crisis? Keep up the excellent work. Regards, Luke Smith." So, we can each answer any of these that we want. Have I had any players balk at playing in a particular cosm? Personally, I haven't had anybody just say I would rather not play in cosms. I do have certain people that they just don't like playing a Storm Knight from a particular cosm, but normally I haven't personally had a problem. But as I've discussed, that's perfectly legitimate, and if you have concerns or your players have concerns, you can do your session 0 or a mid-session talk about that type of thing. What about you two, JM? Have you had anybody just not
Not really.
like?
My players, they always get on their guard when they go into Tharkold or Rorsch. They know what those entail. They specifically don't like the world laws of a Rorsch, but usually I make the hook too good for them not to have a very strong reason why they would want to be going there. I've never had anyone say, "No, I don't want to go, I'm not going to play. I don't want to go there." I know my players well enough to know, what body horror issues to stay away from or
Mm-hmm.
what themes to stay away from. Um, but yeah, I've never had anybody go, "Nope, don't want to go there." Probably because they know I'd be like, "Well, that's fine. We'll be done with this adventure in about 2 or 3 weeks, and then just be able to come back, right back to the table."
Right. Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah.
Okay. Oh, what about you, Mark?
Well, that's the Tharkold is the same. I mean, I've said this before in episodes before. In the early days of Torg Eternity, I wasn't a big fan of Tharkold based on some aspects of it and how you could play that cosm if you went in deep, dug deep into those aspects of that dominant submissive thing. Not interested at all. And for the home game that Rod runs, when we had our conversations about it, I was like, if that's what you want to write, knock yourself out. You just let me know when that starts. I'll bow out until you're done. You let me know when you're back in, and then I'll come back in. Um, and from the standpoint of Torg Eternity, as the way that the game is laid out, it's somewhat different from other role playing games in that you're almost like a special forces mission team, right? And so it's not unusual for that
Mhm.
group to have there's a core group, but then the specialists come in and go out based on what your mission is, right? And so it would not be unusual to have that change. And I recognized that it was impacting me if I made that decision. And so it wasn't, I'm not putting on the group like we're not going to play if I can't, if we're going to go there. I just like Mark's not going to play.
Hmm.
So, other than that, I mean, I've had um my wife is not a fan of playing from certain cosms just because she doesn't find them interesting.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um she loves playing spellcasters and elves in Isle, but that's because she can't she cut her teeth in
Hmm.
second edition D&D, and so she's that kind of feels like a throwback to her,
Mhm.
and it's very comfortable for her. But I've never had anybody say, I don't want to do that.
Hmm. And if you do, that's fine. You can either
Mhm.
decide as a game master if a lot of people or you always want to play with the same people, you can decide just not to go to those cosms or take that aspect out of those cosms, or somebody, as Mark said, you can bow out.
Mhm.
Um, Not applying directly to Torg, but I always feel, especially in your home groups, not necessarily official published because of IP laws and stuff like that, but beg, borrow, steal from other games.
Oh
Whether
yeah.
it's ideas or whatever. And just yesterday with my home group, we had played Torg, but another game master does another game, and there's aspects in that game that we are getting at a level of experience that it starts bringing in nasty stuff, like mean core type things in it. And one of the players specifically hates party infighting, which doesn't really happen with Torg because everybody's heroic except for the occasional mind control that happens, but then you can have fun with that, as you can see on Wednesday streams every once in a while. But that's one of those things that might occur. So we had a group conversation about that aspect might happen, like where it might not affect us as a group, but maybe some of our NPC allies or between
Mhm.
NPC allies, or we'll get on board, we'll be able to see it approaching. So it's not just a big, all of a sudden party fight happens because that particular player hates hates the the possibility of that getting into real life where people get really invested in their characters and stuff like that. So if you have people like that, you can go that way as also. You can learn from how that works in other systems. So that was the balking at playing in a particular cosm. Then what happens if words travel repeatedly? Well, depends on if they transform or not. They might transform, and then if they transform again without having without being filled back up with possibility energy through glory events, they're gonna what if? They're gonna just poof into
Mhm.
nothingness. Um, Travel to places. Um, Especially say, well, I'll just because I don't want to say, oh, come back in 20 seconds, but Pan Pacific, and it's been out there long enough. Pan Pacific is a so-called secret invasion. So what happens in those? There is a war going on. You can have the governments or the puppet masters behind the governments. Maybe they direct air traffic a different way and they use the invasion as a, hey, we're not allowing people in, here we're shutting down border crossings and stuff because they want to keep things controlled and they don't want people just what ifing, but sometimes maybe there's an important ord on the way over, and if he what ifs, then that might make things easier on them. So, go with, I would say, go with story, and there's ways to divert airplanes and traffic, and having a good reason. There's a worldwide invasion of craziness going on. So, any other thoughts? We'll start with Mark on this one.
Well, so oops, sorry, my phone's going off. Oh, that's my daughter. Go with JM.
Okay, JM.
Not really, not more than what you said. I do love the idea of, especially in some of the more brutal, um, or diabolical uh, cosms, the High Lords or their agents using the what ifs as a way to deal with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have. I don't know that any of my players listen to this, but there is a mad scientist. And the group is after it for different reasons, but there's a mad scientist who is working on something that essentially creates a small localized field of, core Earth, and they're planning to use it as like an assassination thing. They'll know
Oh,
where
that's a
the
cool
rebels are
concept.
at, and they're going to just basically force the rebel compound back into core Earth and then shift it back. And oh, look at that. What rebels?
Oops.
What
Oops.
rebels?
Right. And so like they're
It's
like
like a
it is
reality bomb.
right. It's sort of like an inverse reality bomb. And it remember the High Lords have far more knowledge of how this whole thing works than the average Storm Knight. So getting getting the Storm Knights to actually rescue somebody and then forcing them right near that boundary line. Oh, the road is blocked. We'll just go off the road here, and you've just handled a threat for the High Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's Pan Pacifica, that's Nile Empire. Um, Darkhold, it would just be a techno demon slamming into your car and knocking you over the line.
Throw you.
That's right. Yeah, just grab the hood of the car and do a 360 like hammer throw, and you end up back in Russia. And hey, where's the guy we were taking? And what guy? Like he never existed. Um, yeah, I like using that as a oh no, they are smarter than we are.
Mm-hmm.
We can't underestimate that they know how the rules of reality work.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're going to transform the first time. So if it's by,
Right.
in quotes accident, they're going to transform, they're going to adapt. They might not want to leave, but if they do, then they don't get filled back up with possibility energy. There's a whole adventure that starts with that premise of we need you guys to go into the living land and rescue people, because if we send people there and they come back and they're ords, they could
Mhm.
what if. So,
Yeah.
did you have anything to add, Mark, to that?
Well, I I don't. Jam's giving me ideas, and I like it. Um, I
Welcome to
don't.
Dirty GM Ideas with JM,
Yeah,
sub
your host
a subsection
JM.
of the
That's
show.
right. Ha ha ha.
That's right.
Um,
We are in the Nile Empire, so I
we
can go
are in the Nile Empire.
full dramatic supervillain here.
That's right. Um, so I don't do the whole. I haven't done a whole lot with the Ord thing. What I end up doing is I like taking what looks like an Ord and it's really a realm runner in disguise, because they're doing clandestine things, because they've discovered that they can, like, one of the first things I put up on Infiniverse Exchange has a guy that does tours into Aurora. He takes tours in, and he's a realm runner. He leads them in because people love to be scared, right? Well, how much scarier can it be to be actually in the horror realm? And we'll take you in and we'll bring you out. And sometimes people don't come back because, well, it's just how it works, because you got to go in once and then come back out. But that's their thing. And realm runners, if you make somebody a realm runner, they can hide in the Ord population really, really well, because they look like, especially in Core Earth, they look like everybody else, and you don't really know that they're reality rated until they have to do something outside of Core Earth. So the concept is there, and I haven't explored it a whole lot, because there's so much more material to do with Storm Knights and Stormers
Mhm.
and the High Lords and Darkness devices and all the cosms we've got to play with, that the idea that Ords vanish or go away, it's just beyond two things. The High Lords don't really want the Ords to go away a whole lot because they need them for the possibility energy, right?
But
And and it's the concept that I have I have a possibility. The energy within me as an Ord, I have a possibility. And
Hmm.
when that's gone, all that's left is me. And if that goes away, so do I,
Hmm.
right? So the High Lords need that and they need the energy because that's what they suck into the darkness device, and that's why they're here in the
Hmm.
first place. It's in their best interest to keep their population around to keep that energy flowing. So it's kind of like a backdrop to the whole thing for me. Not really a foil or anything that I have currently written anything about, but that may change.
yeah, but it's like if I can take away from another High Lord's way to get possibility energy, or these few threats, they're
Hmm.
not Storm Knights, but they're still threats, whether it's political or military or whatever types of threats. Some guy has knowledge to the secret base. If he what ifs, then that's a problem that I don't have to deal with. So yes, that's what some. Hopefully, that gives you some ideas about that. And then the last question there was: have any of your players or yourselves provided any memorable moments of crisis? So I think I said this in Tharkold. There was a player of mine who had a character that played whatever the Cosm card is that forces an Ord to be their thrall, and then
Yeah.
that character died. So then he turned that thrall into his new character, and he
In a
used
moment of
he
crisis, and
used the
Yeah.
moment of crisis as a hey, might have been a thrall to him, but he was a better person than my previous master guy was. So that kind of ended up do I flee? Do I join them and help fight with them, or do I go back to what I was? So he kind of used that as his moment of crisis. That's the main one. Most of I think my players don't really think a lot about the moments of crisis, or they don't. They tend to think of what was I before. Now I'm
Mhm.
this if they're a transformed person, but not necessarily what they did. Um, I've often used connection cards to lead to the past of
Mm.
like previous things instead of just a random person showing up. If they tend to go along a certain way, one of my realm runners, I had a southern police officer buddy that they were in high school. He was a grease monkey that became wrench that became a realm runner, and then the his buddy Bubba became a police officer. And every once in a while, when a connection card was played, it was that police officer who had become a storm knight and had did stuff. So I tend to do things like that. So any moments of crisis either happen in your game or that your players came up with for their characters or you came up with. So Mark.
Um, Not really moment of crisis as in Ord transforming into Storm Knight kind of thing, but I see the point where you transform, where Storm Knight fails a reality check or rolls a one on a surge and rolls it again or doesn't reconnect or whatever, and then you end up transforming from what you were into one of the cosms that you're in. That's happened to me on a number of occasions. And the first time it happened, it was kind of a panic because I was like, "Oh, I don't want to do this. Oh, I don't want to do this because this is I like my guy, right? I like my character." And then when we transformed him, it took us about a half an hour to get him from where he was to what he became. But I was like, "Well, that's kind of cool." And then when it happened the second time to him, I was like, "Well, this isn't a bad thing. This is kind of cool." And it's almost like making your character over again. But you get to um that moment of crisis is kind of in there because you're going from where you were to the new thing. And so it's not necessarily the same
It's almost like a player's moment of crisis.
It is. It is. The first time it happens, you're wigging out because it's almost like I'm gonna die. I liked who I was, and now I've got to become this other thing. And then but then it becomes integrated into the backstory.
Mhm.
And for Kenji, I first character I built in Torg, I was trying to make a Pan Pacifica ninja who mimicked the ninjas the kung fu black belt theater kind of abilities with psionics, and it's specifically telekinesis. But I had not read the rules well enough and didn't realize that mind, when you use TK, mind is the strength,
Hmm.
right? And so when I made him, my mind was my dump stat. And then the first time I went and said, okay, I'm going to do this ninja jump up and off the walls and across the tree limbs and whatnot. And like, okay, what's your mind? I was like, what? My strength is a 10. What's your mind? Like, 5. Well, you can't lift a coffee cup. How are you doing that? But when he transformed into a Rorsch, which was kind of fun. We turned him into a monster hunter. And then when he transformed again, he transformed into Tharcold. And this was after the Tharcold book came out. So I got to redo his psionic powers, and it looked more like it was. I envisioned him,
Mhm.
but at this point he was like 80 or 90 XP. And so he had a whole long history of playing him the way he was. And it was just like, okay, this is just, for those of you listening, if you've never transformed your character and you start watching this stuff happen and you're afraid of it and you start throwing resources don't embrace it. It's a lot of fun. It's different. It's a different way to play a game. It's a lot of fun. So let it happen.
JM.
The only time I've had moments of crisis is when I've run one of the day one adventures. Because most people aren't thinking about when they're making their character for a Torg campaign, the focus is on the cool Storm Knight, not who I was necessarily before.
Mm-hmm.
But we did have one person in the FET 5 game who failed a uh, failed a reconnect check and went from a core Earth actor to a Nile Empire sort of super charismatic, super like pulp superhero, which was a lot of fun. Like that, he had sort of a rebirth, if you will, because of that. So that's more of what's happened in my games. And again, I've only ever run, I think, 2 day one adventures, maybe 3. Um, and really, everyone's looking for their moment of crisis at that point because as soon as one person has one and gets to flip the character sheet over, the rest of the group is like, well, I want access to all of these cool things. Let
Let me do
me
something cool.
exactly let me go do something cool.
Yeah, so the couple of day ones I've done, they're kind of part of the adventure, but I've seen that. And to go along with the transform in game, yes, the first time you are kind of like, but I had this idea, but if you go with it, my first Torg Eternity character was an Edenos who was just the flat Death Claws, Savage, Warrior, and there's one act in one adventure that goes to Akasha reality, and I disconnected and then rolled a 1 for the reconnect and went with the transformation. So I went from the lowest social to the highest social, from the lowest tech to the highest tech, and completely embraced it. And, from the highest spiritual to the lowest spiritual.
Yeah.
So I've completely flip flopped.
Rip the
Still,
transmission right out of that lizard.
but it's now you have a story, you have a background, and
Oh yeah.
I'm not saying I am against backgrounds, people making them, but I always preferred the backgrounds happening in play, whether that's through subplot cards like the connection card that I talked about, or through stuff that actually happens in the game. I really like when that brings out. So, not so much memorable moments of crisis, but memorable transformations and
Hmm.
using
Yeah.
various aspects to reflect on the lives of Storm Knights before they became Storm Knights. So thank you very much, Luke, for your questions, and thank you for listening. And now we will go to the next email from Dave Haynes. I'm not sure when you record the session. I'm probably too late. No, because of various sicknesses, you are not too late. I love the Nile Empire. It's a great setting because it has a lot of character options for people. Hard-boiled detectives, rocket rangers, weird scientists, mystery men, and pulp adventurers. Know that I love mystery men. They're a staple of the genre, and I'm glad that they have as many options as they do perk-wise. But I've always been more partial to my Rick O'Connell and Indiana Jones. That's why my backer archetype I made, the Chosen Warrior, was a female version of Rick O'Connell, complete with reincarnation perk. Deanna, who was one of the original designers and the one of the main rules person, as well as for a long time the social media person front of Ulysses Spila for Torg Eternity. She said that the Mummy franchise was a major inspiration for the setting, but looking at all the perks, would it be possible to get more perks that are more appropriate for our pulp adventurers, since so many are for the mystery men? So I will answer this one last. So let's go with JM. Your thoughts on pulp adventurer perks as opposed to pulp mystery men perks.
I feel like the prowess tree has like everything that I would normally think of like as a pulp adventurer. Brawler, bodyguard, double tap, sharpshooter, sniper, those kind of rough and tumble, um, like just surviving by blade and wit and fist or trademark weapon, right? That's so I don't know. From a design perspective, I see maybe what we need is like a massive compilation of all of the different talents, because I know there are prowess perks spread across the Torg Cosm books. But I feel like I don't know. I feel like that is a pretty well supported.
Just look elsewhere
archetype.
outside of the pulp perks.
Yeah, because the pulp perks, I get it. The pulp perks really do lean into sort of the mystery men, sort of superhero, weird science kind of thing. But the other thing is, right? You could always
Jam. I need to. I gotta bail.
Okay.
My son just called me. He's
okay.
He's sick. He's coming home from work, and so I got to go get him.
Okay.
It's right around the corner, so maybe only take me 10 or 15 minutes. If I get back in, I'll just leave the cameras up and everything, and if I get back in, I'll get back in, and otherwise.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Sorry.
And hey, those listening, we record these, but real life happens. We understand. So
life happens. Absolutely.
Vaya con Dios, my friend.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully, I'll be back shortly.
Okay. So I guess I will answer next. That's a couple of times I've been wrong today. Okay, so yeah, I would agree with that. The pulp powers also reskinning. They don't have to be flashy.
I agree.
The prowess perks, yes, a lot of those fit right in with the Indiana Jones type or a Rick O'Connell type character. But pulp, the flashy mystery men-ish powers can be just reskinned. Right now, there's kind of three different ways for pulp powers. For the same, I call them sources. So you can have an innate source, which is just it came from you,
right?
And then you can have the weird science version of it, is you developed, or you or somebody else developed this device that does this effect, or the mystical, whether you're a priest of somebody or you found this magical amulet, you say a couple of words and boom, all of a sudden, you can do this effect. So there's various sources of those powers, and you can take that further. Like I believe tough as nails is a pulp power that might it either ups your toughness or gives you an extra wound or something like that. You can use those and just say I'm tough. I'm just a tough guy. I can
Yeah.
just do this thing. The
Or if it's coming from, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, do yours because
I was
my
going to say that the coming from you power doesn't, or source doesn't have to mean like Doc Savage, right? With skin of bronze. Like, think about, I mean, Daredevil is sort of a weird way to look at it, but Daredevil's physical skills come from training,
Mhm.
right? That you can explain pulp powers as training, or again, like you said, right? If Rick O'Connell is secretly a magi and did not realize it, that's a mystical sort of source, even though you don't necessarily recognize it.
Mhm. And with the reskin, I have a Nile priest who I use both pull powers and miracles and say that
Mhm.
they're all miracles
Yeah,
because I just say that, hey, I'm invoking this miracle and then I do a cold ray because you can
yeah,
just reskin. And
right.
another one that would be really good as a reskinned is I believe it's Gi- Gizmotier. It's
Mm-hmm.
there's the weird science. There's a gadgeteer and gizmoteer or gizmos maybe.
Gizmos, yeah, where you
One
get to come up with a couple of cool devices on the fly.
fly. I was thinking of the one that allows you to just put together. Basically, it's the MacGyver perk, which is
Mm-hmm.
allows you to just put a few things together and solve a problem. And you can do that, a limited amount of times. But you don't necessarily have to say, "Oh, I'm always, be the tinkerer who's carrying a backpack full of gizmos and spare parts." You could be the Indiana Jones that you see the saw blades pop up, and then you use that as a reskin of you're figuring out, okay, this is how I get past it. And then
Yeah.
you get past it that way instead of pulling out your tinker bag and making a way to stop it. So I'm all for reskinning. I'm all for game master, getting with your game masters and hey, I really like this idea, but there's nothing out there, or there's this other thing in this other group, but that I can't get. But is there a way to change it or move it over and have a copy of it? I'm all for that type of stuff. As a game master, as a player, get together, make your Cosmverse your own. I'm not saying there will never be more pulp power perks. I'm just saying that there is a lot out there, and they're blueprints also for you to come up with your own perks. And there's other perk categories that only have a handful of perks. So, anything else to add to that?
I mean, not really. That's yeah, I think we kind of covered it.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dave, for writing in. And like I said, we have one last email, but we're going to save that for the end. And when we get to the end of the episode, you'll find out why. And if I don't remember, JM hopefully will remind me.
It's a
So,
lot of pressure on me.
yeah, because Mark left.
I know, it was his idea.
He comes up with the good idea and then leaves. Okay, so we're talking about part two of Nile Empire, and this last one was a lot with Nile Empire, so that
Mhm.
kind of went into it. As sorry, my voice just sorry about that. Like I said, I didn't want to delay again, but my voice is still a little off. Talking about Nile Empire, thoughts, ideas, inspirations, uh, maybe some mechanics. We talked a lot about the mechanic and more of that last time, but anything, everything Nile Empire.
Just
just,
open-ended
just
go.
open-ended go.
Oh man. Um, like I think I mentioned last time, like really lean in. I think one of the underrated um sources for the Nile Empire are soap operas. Go to TV tropes. Actually, TV tropes alone
Hmm.
is probably best exemplified in the Nile Empire, where everything is on trope or on brand. But like the soap opera mechanics of it was a twin, it was a doppelganger, it was somebody who had surgery to look like, or somebody who had surgery not to look like them. These not just dramatic, but we want to go into the melodramatic um, in the Nile Empire. And by that I mean over the top. Like there is no question about what someone's feeling or what somebody wants or does someone like me or not in the Nile Empire. It is, you know, standing outside your plot with a boombox held over its head, like playing the theme song. Um, Inspirations for me are always gonna, like we mentioned a lot of them, Indiana Jones, um, The Mummy. We just watched those with my son, and they hold up. Like they're so fun. Um, but then I like the golden age of superheroes as well. So like DC's golden age. So like Dan Garrett Blue Beetle, where he got his power from a scarab, and original Flash, like the Jay Garrick Flash, who has Hermes wings on his
Hmm.
helmet, and um, all of the people that then Alan Moore took and made into really dark characters for Watchmen. Like if you know the lineage there, they were all bright and happy characters
Hmm.
before. Yeah, so like the Shadow, like, and if you don't know the comics or the stories, or I mean, you can find the pulp
Hmm.
radio dramas online for free now. But the Shadow with Alec Baldwin, the Phantom with Billy Zane, maybe not cinema, but really fun pulpy movies.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of the soap opera, just last night I reintroduced a villain. Um, Not to give spoilers for adventures out there, but I think I could be generic enough. There is a specific villain that is used in the Nile Empire Mega Adventure, and there's a point where the adventure is set up for him to succeed, and it's like overwhelming force, and you're supposed to tell that to the players. One of my players like came up with a good way to do it to get around that forced surrender, and then played the martyr card. So okay, fine. You don't give in, but you kill yourself, you kill the villain, you kill all the henchmen, etc. And then because I'm all for changing
Mm-hmm.
adventures as much as you want, that group did the first two acts. And those two acts together kind of made a little story. So then they went on and they went and did other things. And now I have a new group that they wanted to play a Empire adventure. So I started them off at Act 3, and they just knew the history because the two Storm Knight groups were, part of, say, the Delphi Council. So, that information's transferred over to them. And because I didn't want to necessarily bring back that villain as is, which happens all the time in the Nile, that's the
Yeah.
trope, but you played a martyr card. So what do I do? Okay, this villain's daughter now takes up the mantle. Now I have a legacy villain, and
Mm-hmm.
comes and the party is like, wait a second, we thought that villain was a guy, and now it's and they're trying to figure out what's
Mm-hmm.
going on, and now they have somebody who wants to take them out because they took the Delphi Council took out their dad.
Oh yeah.
And you can do wonderful things like that. You can kind of twist those tropes or do the legacy characters. They the A couple of sessions before that, they used the card to bring back one of the villains because then they got some possibilities, and they were running really, really, really low on possibilities. So lean into those Cosm cards, lean into those tropes, change things, because while lean into the tropes, certain same tropes over and over can get overused and get
Mm-hmm.
kind of repetitive and predictable. So figure out ways to twist those and to bring those back.
Yeah.
So
Um,
the villain
I
who
love,
becomes a hero, that
yeah,
type of thing.
yeah, and I love legacy, the idea of legacy in the Nile Empire, where the next person who puts on the mask may not have any may want to not have anything to do with you, but the heroes make their own new enemy because they're like, oh, we've got to go stop him because he's the same person as before, or maybe they're like you said, villain to hero, hero to villain. Even the fact that like you can set it up in the Nile Empire because it's so ripe for it that the only way to defeat villain B is to bring villain A back from the dead because they had the one thing that could defeat villain B. Okay, well now you've just brought back someone else, you know, to defeat the devil, the devil or the
Hmm.
devil you don't know. Um, I think I think there's a lot of there's I mean it's pulp superheroes and pulp magic. And I know we're throwing pulp around a lot. And that is essentially a genre of story that came out in like the 1920s and 30s
Hmm.
and a little bit into the 40s. It was printed on pulp paper is really kind of where it came from. So we're talking like weird tales, strange tales. I just picked up speaking of pulps, I just picked up like the first 5 books of the Lensman series, which is outside of the Nile Empire, but kind of right in that high adventure,
Hmm.
two-fisted. Um, yeah. And I think in the Nile Empire, you also have this feeling that no matter how bad things actually look, you can kind of count on the fact that you as the heroes can overcome the death trap, can outsmart the villain. The villain is going to be more powerful than you, Storm Knights, and GMs don't worry about game balance when making your villain in the Nile Empire. But give him feet of clay or her feet of clay, right? They are going to be overconfident. They don't have to be stupid, but they're going to be overconfident because that's the world law,
And they
right?
want
The
to
law,
gloat about it.
they want to gloat about it. Never kill a Storm Knight when you can capture them and put them in an overly complex trap that you can explain your plan and then walk away and let the trap run its course. It'll be fine.
Yes, of course. It
Yeah,
always
just
works
lean
out.
into it. Right, just lean into it.
As again, I like giving a lot of personal examples because these are actually played out.
Mm-hmm.
So their theory is good, but actual stuff is actually, hey, this is
Yeah.
what happened in a game. Uh, my current home group that I'm playing, they were in a situation where the first 2 cards flipped in the combat. The first one was card number 40, which is the worst card, doesn't matter which deck it is. And it was add an obstacle plus the heroes are set back. And the obstacle that I rolled was all heroes disconnect.
I did the same thing on
Very,
stream.
wow, yes. And then like I don't remember the specifics of the next one, but the specifics of the next one were bad also. And by forcing them to reconnect and having gotten so hurt, they used all their cards. They like within 3 rounds they had all used all their possibilities because now they had taken damage without being able to soak, and then now any amount of shock damage they were having to soak so they didn't get knocked out. They were just in a really bad place, and that was the pre-fight. So they do the pre-fight, and then they get to the real fight with even less, and it's being drawn out, and then one of them triggers the death trap that the whole place is
Mm-hmm.
collapsing. Um, so instead of fighting, they noticed that the enemies were just trying to leave. They had stopped fighting, and they kind of did the look at each other like a hey, temporary truce, and so that we both can get out of this. And it led to a both teams were helping each other get
Mm-hmm.
out of the death trap. And then it was kind of a okay, we're out of this DSR
Mm-hmm.
death trap, so now walk away for the next day.
Let's just walk away. Yeah.
Just a we'll meet again and we'll finish it. But right now we're good.
I had the same thing happen in the sad and I'm
Wow.
I'm thinking about it. Gabe was just infuriated by what was the first card came out. It was either right before or right. Oh yeah, they were disconnected, and then they couldn't put any cards in their pool.
Oh, confused.
Yeah. Oh, and he was like, "Well, like I'm gonna play this card and I'm like, "You can't. You're disconnected." And plus, confused is the one thing that triggers and is like you can't use
Possibility or cards.
seize the initiative to
Right.
prevent confused because it won't let you play cards. And oh, they were just I mean they got beaten down. But in that game, that's the same game where uh they used the hatred that one of the other villains that they had encountered, the voice of the headless, had for Dr. Mobius to help them tackle this thing they wanted to do, Dr. Mobius, and then they were betrayed and ended up having to fight the voice of the headless, Dr. Mobius, at the same time. The other thing, like there are some cosms where I'm very picky about physics
Mhm.
in the game or logic. In the Nile Empire, I tend to default to start Trekian, or let's call it Roddenberryan technobabble. If the players are in the middle of a fight and they're like, I want to do this weird thing because I have plausible or barely plausible explanation here, let them do it. If they want to channel the electricity from
Reverse
the
polarity.
yeah, reverse the polarity, use the Heisenberg compensator. I'm a mummy, so I don't conduct electricity. It'll just pass, or I conduct electricity. It won't kill me. It'll just pass through. Let them have the role. Don't go like because in other cosms, I may be like, no, that's not the way pain works. Like in Tharkol, like
Right, right.
no. But in here, like let them. So in my game, you can go check it out in the FET 5 game. They were infiltrating a movie um, a propaganda film that Dr. Mobius was putting on to then show in the Nile Empire to show how awesome he was. And they ended up getting Zorba ended up getting cast as Dr. Mobius because he gloried on a persuasion uh, test to allow him to be in the movie. And the group came up with this idea of using the glory to basically subvert the propaganda film and turn it into an anti-propaganda film. And I'm like, all right, how would you do this? And we ran it as kind of an extended DSR, and so would I allow that in Orosh? No. Or even Pan Pacifica, probably not.
Mhm.
But in the Nile Empire, it was the most Nile Empire thing that they sort of did, aside from stealing a Zeppelin to flee a base and turning it around and flying it back onto the base as a giant like Hindenburg
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah, those are really awesome, and with the Nile Empire, you can really push that type of thing, and you can change stuff. So Torg is set up as being cinematic, as in you have your acts, you have your scenes, your fade to blacks, and Nile Empire. A lot of times you'll have the cutscene to commercial, and then when you come back, things have changed. It's not exactly how it was. A character might be standing in a different
Yeah.
place, and if you can use that to either help the scene or help the players, the characters advance the plot, um, not have them just get completely obliterated because of bad rolls and stuff. Another one that happened is they were fighting a bunch of things. Most of the characters went into a room, got surrounded, were getting beat on pretty harshly. One of the characters never stated that they walked into the room, but then when it got time to run away, it was well, you came into the room because combat is fluid, it moves.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, now that you want to run away, you can run away and close the door.
Yeah.
because the enemies don't have opposable thumbs and they can't open the door. So you can massage reality. You can change things to help the players, or if the players are steamrolling something, you can change it a little bit because there's always the cliffhanger when the scene ends or the fade to black happens, and then when it starts, it's not exactly the same. Like it looked like it
Yeah.
was really harrowing and bad, but then the drop isn't as far as you thought it was, or
Yeah.
there's the trash truck driving under that catches the falling person, and things like that. So, um, like you said, don't tone down your villains, but just realize that you can use a lot of those things that in other realities you probably wouldn't. You
Right.
wouldn't want it to be that coincidence that the
Yeah.
the truck with the bed filled with mattresses goes under the bridge at the time when the PC is pushed off. Well, you can do that in the Nile Empire, and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. GM tactics wise, I also I'll do far more cinematic things in the Nile Empire, and by that I mean like I'll do scene wipes and just be like, okay, we're gonna wipe, and you're back at the base. What are you gonna do? They'll travel by red line, right? The fastest way to travel. I will actually like I always try to end in the Nile Empire. I always try to end on a cliffhanger, and then sometimes I have actually uh, done cutaway scenes at the end where the villain gets to say one final thing, even if they're not anywhere near. The heroes go back and they're like, "Hey, we wrap up, we finish an act. They're getting their new possibilities, their new cards, and I'll cut away to the villain sitting in his lab. This will end them. Soon they will all fear the name of," and then cut to black. You can do stuff like that in the Nile Empire because it's cinematic and it's sort of like on brand
hmm
for the real quick kind of snappy uh, action adventure that inspired the Cosm.
Yep, I completely agree. I will say I tend not to play Storm Knights from Nile Empire myself,
Hmm.
mainly because everybody wants to play from the Nile Empire. So I got to be,
It is very popular.
it's like I have to be contrary in that. So I
Mhm.
tend to like look at other things. But again, I do have a priest that I use a lot of pulp power. I pick like my three miracles, and then I was looking at other stuff, going, I really like force field. I'll just have it as a prayer. I'll just
Yeah.
have it as a miracle. I'll just reskin it, and
Yeah. Take the
you can do
limitation that
that
you
and
have to
things.
like do hand gestures and like there's like an activation thing and you're set.
And we once my brother played a Stallinger that he started off as having transformed into Pan Pacifica as a electric samurai shuriken.
Yeah.
And then he transformed in game to Nile Empire. So then he basically got rid of all the electric samurai stuff and got a bunch of pulp power things. So you can have, because stuff like that, flying starfishes fit Nile Empire as much
Yeah.
as they
Yeah.
fit
100%.
living land.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can have those things. You can have the John
I
Carter
walk
from
away for
Mars.
15 minutes and you guys are playing about Stallingers. I mean, come on.
Yes.
Really?
Yes. We were talking about specific things that have happened in our own campaigns that touch on the Nile Empire, and how you can lean into tropes, how you can twist tropes, legacy villains. You can defeat the villain instead of having that villain come up, or that villain's clone or brother. You have that villain's daughter come up to take the
Hmm.
mantle, and now she has vengeance against the people who took out her daddy. Things like that. So that's what we were basically talking. So we have a few more minutes, and it was completely open. It was just no questions. So the last couple of minutes before I get back to the last email,
I was going to
Mark.
remind you.
Yeah, I forgot until I like looked over at my
No,
screen. It was
no,
like,
don't worry. I was going to bring it up.
So, any final thoughts on Nile Empire? Cool things to do, inspiration, stuff that have happened in your own games as a player or as a game master? For Mark.
Well, I'm I got nothing. Um, I I enjoy the Nile Empire just because it's got so much potential for, I mean, literally anything. With weird science, we talked about this, I think, last on part one. Weird science is such a great, how does it work? Well, it's weird science. How does it work? Well, it's magic. It's such a great catch-all for why is a thing the way it is. You really, and it's because it's pulp heroes, it's heroic, and it just lean into that whole over the top kind of thing. Just fantastic for that. I've completely lost the flow of the podcast because I had to step out and I
Uh,
was having conversation with my son. So I'm like, where are we? I don't know. And then I step in and Stallingers. I'm like, really?
No,
Um,
that was one that it was kind of like the influencer when my brother suggested he wanted to be a Stallinger. I'm like, huh? And then he gave me a good hook, so okay, let's go for it.
yeah,
You sold me.
I don't know that I have anything constructive on that front to offer as
Okay.
far as
So, um, I'll just then read the last email and explain why we didn't get to this one at the beginning. This email is hello to all three of you. I wanted to express my appreciation for your podcast, so thank you. It's been an absolute blast listening to it, and I'm grateful for the insights and new ways of thinking about our Torg game that you've offered. However, I'm not sure if it's a good idea to read this email on the show as my English may not be up to par. And I'll just say, after reading this email, and I read it to JM and Mark previously before we started recording, you wrote this email better than I can read this email, so I have no
It is
problems.
true. I can attest to this.
he's not wrong.
So, my question is related to some of the glimpses you've given in your home game, such as the Rule of Two and the interaction of Storm Knights with various realities. I've assembled a large group of 12 players. That's awesome. Soon to be more, playing in 3 cosms and 4 in a few weeks. The games are strictly Core Earth and One Reality, following the events of the Day 1 games. My intention is to keep it separate and specialized for most of Year 1, gradually opening up more diversity and information about the world and setting. My question is about constructing campaign arcs. How do you prepare them, play them, end them, and begin anew? In my opinion, Torg is a deeply profound game, hiding beneath a veneer of stars and glitter, and already, how can you say you don't do English good?
I know, right? That's a
You're using
beautiful
words like
thing.
veneer. You're doing fantastic.
As Greg Gordon revealed in the new core book, it provides us with philosophical views on the world, dimension, and cosmos. It questions the value of heroism. See, I read worse than you write. The will to sacrifice, the nature of good and evil, light and darkness, and so much more. That's what I hope to give my players, along with a healthy dose of laughter and smiles. Looking forward to your next installment. Best regards, Philippe. So, Philippe, thank you very much for your email.
Yes.
Your question, constructing campaign arcs, how do you prepare them, play them, end them, begin anew, I think would be a wonderful um, topic for an entire podcast episode, just alone or with additional um, kind of going outwards from that. So I would like to do that in our next podcast episode. I would like we've done 4 realities. We are going to get to the next realities after this one. I just think that having a break halfway through would be beneficial. Um, I did post when we missed a couple episodes, and I posted on Discord, hey, would you rather me just or us to just continue with the realities or have a little break? there were some opinions about having a break would be nice. So I think that this would be a break, not as a break of a not having an episode, but as a break of not one of the core realities for an episode and get into some of this other things on campaign arcs. I think would be really good. So if you're listening to this, please email us at torgdcd@gmail.com and add any questions or comments you might have about campaign arcs, how to set them up, how to play them, prepare them, end them, and begin them anew, or any other relative questions, as well as any questions that you might have. We had 3 between the last episode and this one, which is the same number as we had all previous ones, so keep the questions rolling in.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so it's cool.
So we will get to that next, and that's why we left. This was, I said, our JM and I both said Mark gave us a great idea and then left. But you came back, so it was Mark's idea to put this at the end, and I think that was a good thing. We'll talk about this next time. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast, and sorry for my voice. I am getting better. It's just this whatever I have has taken its toll and lasted a long, much longer than I wanted it to. So once again, thank you for listening. Email us at torgdcd@gmail.com. And until next time, we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. Thanks.
Have a good one.
Good night.